We all are nervous sometimes, and we're shy sometimes, and we're afraid sometimes, and we don't take risks sometimes, and we're fearful, and we have to be careful, and those are all, that's what it means to be human. And we try to get as many people as we can on our side. So if we can get ourselves lumped with the majority, then we can feel greater. But every great innovative idea that ever happened started with a minority, started with an individual thinking like that. Will Rogers said one time, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, you better reform. You know, if you're thinking just like everybody else thinks, what have you got to offer? What is it that this unique thing, this unique human being that has never existed before, will never exist again, has never existed in this day as it exists, as you do in this day, just like every single day. Not only are you unique on this planet, but every day you're here, you're unique on this planet. Instead of that, we say, how can we get everybody to think like I do? Let's get into majority kind of thinking, you see. And that's like one of the first things to understand, that in order to be, Emerson said it, he talked about conformity, he said, to be a man you must therefore by nature be a nonconformist. And yet we have difficulty with nonconforming people, with people who have different ideas, with people who want to try something different, people who don't accept that we always have to be the way we've always been. We have quite a bit of difficulty with that. Most human beings use about 1/100th of their potential within their brains that it's capable of using. And every time we see somebody who is able to do things that seem so phenomenal, instantly we say, well, that's a weird person, or that's a freak, they must be faking it, or whatever. When there are places in the world where people don't even think pain, they don't even have words. There are some cultures, particularly in Eastern philosophies, where pain itself is not even a part of their vocabulary. They don't even invent words for that because they train themselves not to think in ways that are going to be immobilizing and depressing and so on. And I would work on this when I was working with people early in my career. And one of the greatest things that you can learn in your life is the understanding that as you go through your life, even the people who love you the most are not going to approve of you half of the time. Somebody says, you're a nerd. Terrible thing. I mean, one of the things you have a choice. You say, oh my God, they know. They've discovered it already. And you act like a neurotic. You have that choice. You have other choices as well. The choice to ignore that. The choice to say that's somebody else's opinion. If somebody says to me, Wayne Dyer, I don't like your books. Well, I expect that when you say something in public, when you talk to a lot of people, when you write something, that there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like what you say. One of the highest levels, one of the highest places you can get to in your life is a place called being independent of the good opinion of other people. Not necessarily needing everyone to approve of you all of the time. And we ought to have a lot of people out there who understand that, so that when they go through their lives and they run into disapproval, that instead of becoming depressed about that, that you understand that that's a condition. That's what it means to be a human being. I'm saying don't become immobilized ever by what anybody else thinks of you. And when you do, understand that all you are doing is saying your opinion of me is more important than my own opinion of myself. Every time you're down. Every time you're down. That you are making other people's opinions of you more important. Now, a great misinterpretation there is that somehow this is a selfish philosophy. Believe me, there's nothing selfish in that. One of the simplest learnings that all children seem to understand, the very simple understanding that you can't give away what you don't have. You can't give away what you don't have, obviously. You can't give away 100 hours if you don't have it. You can't give away love for others if you don't have it for yourself. You can't give away success if you don't have it for yourself. You can't love another human being at all if you don't love yourself first and think of yourself as a worthy person. So that if you want to be a great altruist, a philanthropist, somebody who loves everybody in the world, then you've got to get your own house in order. And that's all I'm saying. Get your own house in order. your own self in order, so that you can become one of those people that have transcended, who have gone beyond simply worrying about how they're going to cope with their lives. It mystifies me sometimes. We all have this little child within us, and all little children know how to be happy. All little children know how to be self-actualized, fully functioning, creatively alive. They know how to enjoy their lives. And then somehow they lose it somewhere along the way. And as we get to be adults, we forget what we had. It's the whole theory of whether a glass is half full or half empty. I mean, it's always half full to me. Always half full. If you believe that it's half empty, it's the same thing as saying people are basically evil. And that's a basis for a big theory in psychology. That's what psychoanalytic theory is really basically all about, is that each one of us have an id somewhere within us, and that's an untamed monster. That's something that we have to watch out for, and it will capture us, and it'll destroy us, and it's that all of us have this evil creature residing within us. I can't buy that. I just can't buy that. I look at little children and the way they are, I don't see it. I refuse to think that, even though I know that there are people who behave in evil ways. I believe basically that within each one of us is a reservoir of love and beauty and appreciation and so on, and that we've often lost it in the name of trying to get ahead of the other guy or trying to be successful or whatever. People who know how to enjoy their lives are never a burden to anybody else. They just want to be left alone. Just quit bugging me. Don't always be looking over your shoulder. Don't be monitoring everything that I do. Stop telling me how to live. Stop telling me what to do. Stop trying to live your life through me. Highly functioning people know how to live their lives, and they're never a burden to anybody.
Inspiration responds to our attentiveness in various and sometimes unexpected ways. For example, when I began writing this book, I debated between the two titles, Inspiration, Your Ultimate Destiny, or Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling. One day, while I was swimming in the ocean, I was going back and forth in my mind, trying out both titles. Still uncertain, when I'd finished my swim, I called Reed Tracy, who's the president and CEO of my publishing company at Hay House, from a payphone to get his opinion about the title. While I waited for him to answer, the word calling appeared on the miniature screen of the telephone. Nothing else, just calling. And then the word began to flash on and off as if it were trying to get my attention. When Reed answered, I told him what had just occurred, and we both agreed on Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling, for the title of this book and this program. All of this may appear to be nothing more than a silly coincidence, but I know better. I think of the word inspiration as meaning being in spirit. When we're in spirit, we're inspired. And when we're inspired, it's because we're back in spirit, fully awake to spirit within us. Being inspired is an experience of joy. We feel completely connected to our source and totally on purpose. Our creative juices flow, and we bring exceptionally high energy to our daily life. We're not judging others or ourselves. We're uncritical and unbothered by behaviors or attitudes that, in uninspired moments, are frustrating. Our heart sings in appreciation for every breath, and we're tolerant, joyful, and loving. Being in spirit isn't necessarily restricted to the work we do or the activities of our daily life. We can be inspired and at the same time be unsure of what vocation to pursue or what activities we want to schedule. Inspiration is a simple recognition of spirit within ourselves. It's a return to that invisible, formless field from which all things emanate, a field of energy that I call intention in my previous book, The Power of Intention. My experience with being in spirit. When I'm in spirit, I have a feeling of contentment, but more than this, I experience joy. I'm able to receive the vibrational energies of my source, call them voices or messages or silent reminders, even invisible suggestions or what have you, but they're vibrations of energy that I'm able to align with as I get myself out of the way. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, one of the world's great geniuses, once remarked, quote, "When I am, as it were, completely myself, entirely alone and of good cheer, say traveling in a carriage or walking after a good meal or during the night when I cannot sleep, It is on such occasions that my ideas flow best and most abundantly. Whence and how they come, I know not, nor can I foresee them." End of quote. We don't have to be a genius to know what Mozart speaks of. The same force in a different way is flowing through you and me right now. I've learned to remove resistance to the free flow of this spiritual energy by reminding myself to align with it, or to be in spirit in my thoughts and my expectations. When I sit down to write, my desire is to invite spirit to express through me, and I encourage ideas to flow freely. Like Mozart, I'm connected as if it were to my source in spirit, thinking and expecting to be the instrument of my spiritual source. Ideas flow, and whatever assistance I need just shows up. And, like Mozart, I can't describe how the ideas come, and I can't force them. Staying in spirit seems to be the secret to this feeling of being inspired. I also find that inspiration flows in other areas of my life when my primary mission is like what Michael Berg so beautifully describes in Becoming Like God, Kabbalah, and Our Ultimate Destiny. Quote, "Just as every being is God's business, every being becomes our business as well." Unquote. That is, being inspired necessitates the willingness to suspend ego and enter a space where I want to share who I am and what I have in a completely unlimited fashion.
When you feel inspired, everything works. The reason that everything works is because you have left the material, the physical world, the world of the ego, and you've moved into the world of spirit. And when you move into the world of spirit, into that invisible world, you get connected. And inspiration means inspired. And Patanjali said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction. And you find yourself in a new and great and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents come alive. And you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. There's some very important wisdom in that. This idea of finding yourself inspired means that you allow these dormant forces, these things that are in every single one of us, to come alive. Consciousness begins to expand. Things begin to show up in your life. You begin to manage the coincidences of your life.
What goes around truly does come around. The more you give away and do everything that you do in the service of others, the more that seems to come back. The cycle of real magic takes root. This lesson of prosperity applies to all fields of endeavor. When I was boarding an airplane early one time, I overheard the sarcastic voice of a flight attendant saying, "Here come the animals." I knew it was only a matter of time until that organization perished from a scarcity of passengers. Sure enough, they've gone into bankruptcy. Employees need to know in their souls that they are privileged to serve those who are willing to give of their income to use the service. But I'm not talking to an organization, I'm talking to you. You can shift your consciousness all you want, but you must also shift the emphasis of what you do from results to purpose. Try it. Shift for a 1-month period of time and see if miracles don't start showing up in your life. The less you need to force this new way of being on yourself, the easier it becomes to let it be the guiding principle of your life. It is about allowing your natural self to flow peacefully and knowing your bliss comes from giving and not getting. Letting yourself just flow is a concept you will want to become quite familiar with as you begin to allow the prosperity that you desire in your life. Earlier in this tape, I discussed how everything seems to work perfectly in our lives when we are inspired. Flow is that kind of an inspiration, one so powerful that all obstacles seem to be removed, and we are in love with what we are doing so much that it seems to just flow without any effort from us at all. Getting to flow in your life means achieving a state of concentration so total that everything else becomes non-existent. People who experience prosperity in their lives know how to achieve this magnificent state, wherein their activities, instead of being a tedious set of chores to finish, become more like a meditation, only they are active and involved rather than sitting quietly. Getting to this zone, you are literally watching your body do things that are incredible. You are experiencing magnificent joy or bliss, and nothing can get in your way. You are on purpose, and you are having that peak experience that others can only dream about. There is a way to get to this state of flow. These are not only the secrets to becoming a superachiever in the workplace, they are the secrets for producing genuine miracles in your life. This process includes 1. Having an overriding spiritual goal that gives meaning to your work, making your work a meditative experience, and instead of seeing yourself as doing a particular task, you actually in your mind become the task. You shift from a human doing to a human being, if you will. There is no separation. You and the task are unified, all in the name of that overriding spiritual objective to give of yourself in a purposeful way. 2. Focus and close your mind to all distractions. You can train your mind to focus, and this is why I've been encouraging you to learn to meditate. Give your mind the same mental training that you give your body when you want your body to be in maximum physical condition. You need not be a slave to your senses. Focusing is your natural knowing within. You can either ignore it or go there often. 3. Surrender to the process. You must resist your impulse to strive for what you want. Surrender to God or your higher power, or however you choose to spell it. You must let go and surrender to the actual process. Forget about the result and put your mind and your physical body totally into the experience at hand. This is not that difficult to achieve. Don't strain to achieve. Instead, enjoy the process of the work that you are doing. The results will come independent of your striving for them. 4. Experience the ecstasy. This is the automatic result that will flow to you from the above guidelines. You will know a kind of inner beatitude and bliss that will be unmistakable. It will sneak up on you and hit you over the head, so to speak, but nevertheless, you will know that glorious emotional peak experience if you get yourself to flow in your life. The ecstasy is its own miracle. 5. Watch as you see yourself reaching peak productivity without striving. Your state of ecstasy opens up new vistas of creativity and energy. This natural state of bliss is the key to improving your performance. This is the state that superachievers are able to create for themselves. The processes of surrendering, focusing, and living at purpose lead to ecstasy. When you feel that inner bliss, you simply want more and more of it. The more of it that you are able to create for yourself, the more productive you become. Your thoughts create all of this ecstasy, and ultimately all of the miracles that are going to come into your life in the form of increased prosperity. Your mind is very powerful in terms of what it can produce in your physical reality, as well as the physical reality beyond your own borders. You are now on a path of working toward reversing scarcity consciousness to one of prosperity. This is largely a mental game. You must convince yourself that you and only you are responsible for the pictures in your mind. You must know how very powerful your picturing process is in creating the material world that you experience. This is a universal principle. This is a vital, alive factor of the universe that you are a part of and that is also a part of you. What you can conceive of as a picture in your mind, you can create in the physical world, provided you do not let go of the picture. My wife Marcy and I are currently having our children take lessons from acknowledged masters in the art of meditating and learning to trust one's inner vision. We do this not to give them an advantage over others, but for the purpose of their knowing that they have something within them that no one can ever take away from them, regardless of the material circumstances of their lives. They are learning very early that their peace and tranquility as human beings is dependent upon themselves, and that they have a special retreat within that is always available to them. The way to get to this place of inner peace and consequently to experience higher awareness is to shut down the internal frenzy. The Chinese sage Sengchan Tsen gave us the following piece of wisdom. Stop talking, stop thinking, and there is nothing you will not understand. Return to the root and you will find meaning. Look inward, and in a flash you will conquer the apparent and the void. He is counseling us to simply stop talking and stop thinking. This is the third key to the sense of peacefulness that is a part of the way of the sacred quest. I want to make it clear that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the experience of the presence of God. As you learn to shut down your inner dialogue and become more peaceful, you will begin to know the presence of God in your life. That presence will be felt in both your body and your inner world. Beliefs are removed. Belief is replaced with knowing. At different times in my past, both alcohol and other substances were a part of my own life path. Through meditation, I was able to leave alcohol behind, and I have never touched it since. But with other substances, I believed I could use them when I chose to for an energizing effect beyond anything I had ever experienced. I was able to use them, enjoy increased energy, and leave them alone for long periods of time. But a time came when I knew I was making foolish and non-spiritual choices connected with seeking out these insidious substances. My personal challenge became to rid myself of these insidious habits. I tried reading my way out of it, but I went back. I tried acupuncture, discussions with experts, and herbal cures, but I went back. I was determined that I would no longer play around with any substance, but I went back. Then I had what I call a holy instant, which was for me a divine experience. At 4:05 a.m. on a January morning, I was meditating. In the still quiet of that meditation, the thought of never again using a substance became real. It was my first absolutely direct experience of God. My entire inner screen of awareness became a bright luminescence as I heard a voice say, "You've tried everything else. Why not try me?" I have never in my life known such peace and certainty that God was with me and around me. I felt overwhelmed by the bliss I experienced. I listened to that voice, felt the presence of God, and have not since experienced the slightest desire to go back to any substance. I have debated with myself about putting this very personal story on this tape. That is, my ego self debated with my higher self. But I knew my experience with chemical substances involved helping others to look within instead of outside of themselves for both the excitement and the peace their higher self has for them. If, in my telling this story, one person who experiments with any substance and knows that it is out of control decides to shut down the inner turmoil and seek the help of their loving presence, then it will have been worth it. You needn't have the challenge of getting off drugs to find value applying this third key to higher awareness. It works the same way for every experience you are ready to transcend. Getting to silence and then having God be your personal knowing presence. Getting to silence requires conscious effort on your part. When going within, use the metaphor of the pebble dropping through the various levels of your mind. While the pebble drops, be the witness. Observe compassionately all your chatter and thoughts as you descend to the unified field. When you notice your mind overly crowded with thoughts, practice not focusing on anything just for a few moments. Tell yourself, "My mind is full of the disturbance of chatter and thoughts. I'm going to try to spend 5 minutes without any thoughts bombarding me. I'll dismiss every thought just for a few moments." Use your breath as a means to keep your mind from chattering away ceaselessly. You can do this by focusing your compassionate witness on your breathing. Breathe in deeply, excluding any thoughts as you concentrate on the in-breath. Then exhale slowly and fully with the same concentration. When thoughts appear, as they will, know that they are signaling you to return to mindfulness of your breathing in and out. Your heartbeat can also be used as a focal point for the witness. Return to the steady, rhythmic beat of your heart when you notice thoughts intruding. When you find your thoughts just below the surface in the analyzing level, think of a rose. As you replace the analyzing with the beauty of a rose, you might want to recall this verse by the poet Rabindranath Tagore. "Do not carry a rose to our beloved, because in it is already embodied a message which, unlike our language of words, cannot be analyzed." That is, remember that the habit of analyzing or picking things apart in a judging fashion keeps you from knowing the truth that is at the center of your being. The rose needs no analyzing, as the poet reminds us. It simply is. The same is true of you. At the synthesizing level, when you are feeling the beauty and unity of life, you may discover that you are entering thoughts of pleasure about enjoying this spiritual space. Let go of those thoughts too. The ego enjoys convincing you that you are better than others because you are more spiritual or have deeper understanding. It swims through your consciousness with thoughts like those. When it does, gently send it elsewhere for this time of meditation or prayer. I've always kind of believed that when you come into this world with big dharma, and I obviously have, then what accompanies that is big challenges, big obstacles, big difficulties. Many of you know I spent the first 9 years of my life in a series of foster homes and orphanages. I don't look back on that as anything other than a great opportunity for me to learn self-reliance as a young boy, and then consequently teach people about self-reliance, which is what I've been doing for 35 years or so, with 30-some books and programs of all sorts and so on. It isn't to say that those 9 years weren't filled with some heartaches and some sadnesses and missing your mommy and things like that. But my mom, who is almost 94 now, in a hospital tonight, having a pacemaker put in on Tuesday. At that age, that's a challenging thing as well. I've been through a lot of the kinds of struggles. I mean, we had nothing when I was younger. Everything I have is what I earned. I look upon that as a great advantage. But it was just the Dharma that I chose, I guess. I've been through divorce twice. I know what that feels like. I know the heartache of breakups and have lived with them and struggled with them and have used it to help me to become a better person, a more compassionate, kinder person who listens more than he talks. I've been through the addiction route in my life and struggled with it on many different levels. From alcohol, which I can proudly say it's been 22 years since it's crossed into my body. Yeah, thank you. But the previous 22 years, I drank enough to make sure that these 22 years were covered. So, and not just alcohol, but drugs as well. I've been down that road and know what it feels like and know the struggle of it and the pain of it.
But Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, if you shield the mountain from the windstorms, you'll never see the beauty of the carvings. So the storms of our life, if we try to shield ourselves from the storms of our lives, we don't get to see the beauty of the carvings, of what those storms bring for us. And virtually every spiritual advance, not virtually, every spiritual advance that you make in your life, that I've made in my life, has been preceded by a fall of some kind or another. I always give the example of when I was in high school, I was on the track team, and I was the high jumper on the track team, among other things. And the bar would be up here, and we get back here, and you run up to this is a metaphor for what I'm speaking about, and you run up to the bar, and you run up and get down as low as you can, as fast as you can, and in the process of getting down low, it would allow you to propel yourself over the bar. So the low points of our life are the times when we should be in a state of gratitude, as hard as that is for us to do, but that's what an enlightened being does. Is they begin to see that, these low points in our life, and I've been through some low points in my life, very dramatic low points. When my wife and I separated 12 years ago, I mean, it was the closest thing that I could call it to a depression for months and months. And out of that depression and out of that deep hurt and sadness about breaking up our family, in a sense, because we're not really broken up, but I was able to write The Power of Intention, which is the next book after Erroneous Zones that just soared and just took off and sells in the millions all around the planet. And it came from a place of compassion. That it's when you are in those low points that you have a tendency to reach out to other people with more compassion and more love and more understanding because of what you're going through yourself. So that, I think, and this is true, I could give 1,000 examples of that, but the whole idea of it is that these low points, the struggles that we go through in our lives are really significant things, and look back at them, and you can do an awful lot of growing from them.
So that when you bring higher energy to the presence of lower and slower energy that we call evil, energy that we call disease, energy that we call depression, you are not only sending the disease and the depression and the despair away, you are converting that very energy into the higher and the faster energy that is being brought to its presence. The same thing is true of hatred. When you bring love to the presence of hatred, hatred not only dissolves, but it turns to love. All you have to do is light a candle, turn on a light, and the darkness dissolves. The darkness disappears. But more than that, and this is really crucial for what I'm presenting here this afternoon, the darkness is converted to light. This idea of not dying with your music still in you is really about an awareness that there is some kind of purpose. And that purpose to everything and to your life is not necessarily based upon something that we can figure out with our brain. Like, my purpose is to become an accountant, or my purpose is to find the perfect place to live or the perfect mate. I don't think it's done that way. It's never, to me, an intellectual thing. It's always something that's of the heart. When I ask people to point to themselves, they never point to their brain. They always point to their heart. And Gibran, the Lebanese poet, said that when you're born, your work is placed in your heart. There's something that you feel, and it's very hard to put it into words. In fact, I think it defies words, because words are just more symbols of something that we're trying to express. And it's the feeling that we have in here that I'm here, that I have a heroic mission of some kind, that there's something more to my life than just simply going through the motions and being a commuter and collecting a certain amount of stuff. So to me, not dying with your music still in you is what Maslow called the top of the pyramid. And you remember the pyramid of the self-actualization that begins with the baseline being the longest part, but the baseline is just taking care of basic needs. Like, you learn how to handle and provide for yourself. So you have to, at the very base of this pyramid, you have to feed yourself. And you have to have your needs for water, and your needs for food, and your needs for shelter as you move up this. And then your needs for sort of like companionship and ultimately a need to feel a sense of belonging. Need to feel loved as you begin to move up this pyramid until you get to the very top. And at the very top of this pyramid, there's just a tiny little space up there. And this tiny little space at the top of the pyramid is what we call purpose, where you're living your life as if why you're here is really clear to you. A sense of purpose is not that I'm doing what I was told I was supposed to do, that was programmed into me by somebody in the sky before I showed up here, but that I feel as if why I'm here is being actualized. And when people ask me about how do I get to that place of purpose in my life, I always remind them that your life is like what Joel Goldsmith called it, a parenthesis in eternity. So who you are, Carl Jung referred over and over again to the part of us that is eternal, the infinite part of us. He said the telling question of a person's life is their relationship to the infinite. And until you have that relationship with the infinite, you will not know anything about purpose. So that you almost have to learn how to step outside of yourself and begin to witness yourself from the perspective of who you are as not being this thing that you're observing. You go to the observer, and then you even get to watch the observer. And that's when it starts to get a little bit complicated. But as the observer, or as the witness to the observer, you're sort of watching and noticing. But the sense of purpose comes from being that witness rather than what you are witnessing. And when you get to that place in your life, you begin to realize that who you are in this physical world, this name that you've been given and this body that you are occupying, is nothing more than a parenthesis in something called eternity. It opens parentheses at the moment of your conception. It closes parentheses at the moment of your death. But when you come into this parentheses, when you show up here, you show up with nothing, with no thing. And you go from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, nowhere. And in one instant, conception, you're in now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E. It's all the same. It's just a little question of spacing. Nowhere, now here. So now you're in now here. Hopefully, all of you listening are in now here. There may be some of you listening that are not now here. But while you're in now here, you have some kind of an awareness that you're going nowhere. You're going back to nowhere. So it's nowhere, open parentheses, now here, back to nowhere. It's all one. But there's something different about now here than nowhere. At least we think there is, but we don't have any real confirmation about that unless you're Brian Weiss. Or you know about past lives or future lives and so on. Now, one of the great teachers in my life, Carlos Castaneda, whom I've referred to on many occasions, one of the things that he says is that the problem with humanity living at ordinary levels of awareness is that we are all beings who are going to die, but we act as if we're not. So that we don't really ever come in contact with our immortality or our infinity at all, because we are acting as if this body is all that there is and it's going to live forever. When in fact, there's an awareness in there that we're all going nowhere.
Martin Luther King Jr. once had remarked that the only way to convert an enemy to a friend is through love, not hatred or fighting. We don't conquer anything, and there's nothing to fight. Consider the results we've achieved when we tried to fight something in order to conquer it. For example, ever since war was declared on poverty, there's more of it in the world than ever. Our wars on drugs have only served to triple our prison populations and bring illegal substances to more people at younger ages. As early as junior high school, there's hardly a child who doesn't know how to acquire all manner of drugs. Our wars on crime have resulted in more criminals, more fear, more surveillance, more distrust, and more abuse by law enforcement personnel. Our war on terror has turned us into people who behave toward those we label terrorists in ways that emulate the terrorism we're supposedly desirous of eliminating. And our wars on cancer, obesity, and hunger have not eliminated those conditions either. Here's the reasoning behind what I've just elaborated. The truth of this universe is that we live in an energy system that operates on the law of attraction. That is, we become what we think about all day long. If we think about what we hate, this is an energy that we're offering to our desires. In this system, then, we'll attract more of what we think about. Consequently, more of what we hate is what we will attract. We act on our thoughts. Our thoughts of hate, violence, fighting, and war generate actions of hate, violence, fighting, and war. And lo and behold, we see the fruits of this thinking showing up even if our intentions are positively aligned with good energy or God energy. We get what we think about, whether we want it or not. Thoughts that translate into fighting and war almost always guarantee that the response is a counterforce. That is, others will respond in kind to our desire to fight and conquer. This kind of counterforce can continue for centuries, with unborn generations programmed to carry on the fight. This same understanding of how fighting weakens us and generates more imbalance in our lives is applicable to our experience with addictions. We can become addiction-free relatively quickly if we make a decision to eliminate fighting and conquering from our efforts. The thoughts and energy that replace fighting need to be in the form of non-warlike thoughts. As Emerson said so succinctly, the remedy of all blunders, the cure of blindness, the cure of crime, is love. And addictions constitute one huge blunder. I can assure you, having spent a great deal of my life immersed in such folly myself. Overcoming blunder-filled thinking. For those of you who may not be familiar with my friend Ram Dass, in the late 1960s, he helped shape the awakening consciousness of an entire generation with his bestseller, Be Here Now. One of my favorite Ram Dass stories is the one he tells about an early encounter with Neem Karoli Baba, his guru in India. Ram Dass brought some capsules with him to India that were designed to dramatically alter one's state of consciousness. Neem Karoli Baba confronted Ram Dass about these pills and asked him to give all of them to him. Ram Dass thought that he'd brought a long-term supply of this very powerful psychedelic substance, yet he watched in horror and amazement as this enlightened being swallowed all of them right before his eyes with no visible reaction. His guru then asked him if he had any more, since these obviously weren't working. After telling this story, Ram Dass concluded with one of his most sagacious observations. "If you're already in Detroit," he said, then you don't have to take a bus to get there. Addictions of every description are vehicles that people board in order to get someplace higher, more pleasurable, more peaceful, more tuned in and turned on, and so on. But if you're already aligned with this energy, then it's obviously unnecessary to climb aboard any vehicle headed to a place where you currently reside. I've played with addictions and addictive behaviors for a large part of my life. In fact, I'd say that these various addictions have been among my greatest teachers, allowing me to see that there's a higher level of consciousness and blissful awareness available to us all. But I'm also aware that using substances of non-well-being in order to experience this separate reality is assuredly a counterfeit means of doing so. I'm essentially addiction-free, and I want you to know that I didn't get to this place by fighting my addictive nature. In fact, the more I tried to conquer addictions at various stages of my life to things such as sugar, soda pop, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and certain drugs, the more they'd gain a foothold on me. Force, counterforce. I'd apply my weapons, and they'd bring out their artillery, with my body as the battleground where the war was being waged. I was blundering my way into deeper addiction. Earlier, I quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "The remedy for all blunders is love."
Second verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "Under heaven all can see beauty as beauty, only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good, only because there is evil. Being and non-being produce each other. The difficult is born in the easy. Long is defined by short, the high by the low. Before and after go along with each other. So the sage lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. The sage can act without effort and teach without words, nurturing things without possessing them. He works, but not for rewards. He competes, but not for results. When the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever." Unquote. Living the paradoxical unity. Has it ever occurred to you that beauty depends on something being identified as ugly? Therefore, the idea of beauty produces the idea of ugliness, and vice versa. Just think of how many concepts in this duality belief system depend on opposites. A person isn't tall unless there's a belief system that includes short. Our idea of life couldn't exist without that of death. Day is the opposite of night. Male is the antithesis of female. What if you instead perceived all as a piece or a glimpse of the perfection of oneness? I think this is what Lao Tzu is suggesting with his description of the sage who lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. Imagine the perfect oneness coexisting in the apparent duality, where opposites are simply judgments made by human minds in the world of the 10,000 things. Surely the daffodil doesn't think that the daisy is prettier or uglier than it is, and the eagle and the mouse have no sense of the opposites we call life and death. The trees, flowers, and animals know not of ugliness or beauty. They simply are, in harmony with the eternal Tao, devoid of all judgment. As the sage lives openly with apparent duality, he synthesizes the origin with the manifestation, without forming an opinion about it. Living without judgment and in perfect oneness is what Lao Tzu invites his readers to do. He invites our wisdom to combine perceived opposites and live a unified life. The perfection of the Tao is allowing apparent duality while seeing the unity that is reality. Life and death are identical. Virtue and sin are judgments needing both to identify either. These are the paradoxes of a unified life. This is living within the eternal Tao. Once the dichotomies or pairs of opposites are transcended, or at least seen for what they are, they flow in and out of life like the tides. Practice being a living, breathing paradox every moment of your life. The body has physical boundaries. It begins and ends and has material substance. Yet it also contains something that defies boundaries, has no substance, and is infinite and formless. You are both the Tao and the 10,000 things simultaneously. Let the contrasting and opposite ideas be within you at the same time. Allow yourself to hold those opposite thoughts without them canceling each other out. Believe strongly in your free will and ability to influence your surroundings, and simultaneously surrender to the energy within you. Know that good and evil are two aspects of a union. In other words, accept the duality of the material world while still remaining in constant contact with the oneness of the eternal Tao. The debilitating necessity to be right and make others wrong will soon diminish. I believe that Lao Tzu would apply the Tao Te Ching to today's world by suggesting the following. First, live a unified life. Enter the world of oneness with an awareness of the propensity to compartmentalize everything as good or bad, right or wrong, beautiful or ugly, are standards of the physical world, not the Tao. Contemplate the insight that duality is a mind game. In other words, people look the way they look, period. Criticism is not always necessary or helpful. See the unfolding of the Tao inside everyone, including yourself, and be at peace with what you observe. Be a good animal and move freely, unencumbered with thoughts about where you should be and how you should be acting. For instance, imagine yourself as an otter, just living your otterness. You're not good or bad, beautiful or ugly, a hard worker or a slacker. You're simply an otter, moving through the water or on the land freely, peacefully, playing and without judgment. When it's time to leave your body, you do so, reclaiming your place in the pure mystery of oneness. This is what Lao Tzu means when he says, when the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever. In other words, you don't have to leave your body to experience forever. It's possible to know your eternal self even in the embodied condition. When duality and judgment crop up, allow them to be a part of the perfect unity. When other people create dichotomies, you can always know oneness by practicing the Tao. Also, accomplish much by trying less. Effort is one piece of the whole. Another piece is non-effort. Fuse these dichotomies, and the result is effortless action without attachment to outcome. This is precisely how you dance with someone. You make an attempt, assume a position, listen to the music, and let go all at the same time, allowing yourself to easily move with your partner. Combine the so-called opposites into the oneness of being without judgment or fear. Labeling action as a fine effort implies a belief that trying hard is better than not trying. But trying itself only exists because of beliefs about not trying. Attempting to pick up a piece of trash is really just not picking up the trash. Once you've picked it up, then trying and not trying are irrelevant. Understand that you can act without the implied judgment of words such as effort and trying. You can compete without being forced to focus on outcome. Eliminating opposites paradoxically unifies them so that it is unnecessary to identify with one position. I imagine that in today's language, Lao Tzu would sum up the second verse of the Tao Te Ching in these two simple words. Just be. Do the Tao now.
One man who came here from India in the early part of this century, his name was Vivekananda. He came here he was sent here really, and showed up in Boston, I think 1910, and wrote some beautiful things. He's really one of India's great saints. And he had these to say. I used this at the beginning of the third part of Your Sacred Self. He said, the blossom vanishes of itself as the fruit grows. So will your lower self vanish as the divine grows within you. Just like a blossom vanishes as the fruit emerges, so will the lower self vanish as the divine grows within you. And the divine is not some religious message, some orthodox thing that you have to memorize. The divine is that thing that Pierre Teilhard called the glue that holds the entire universe together, something called love. And that's what it's really all about. And this love is really the very thing that holds your life together. Did you ever think about the moment that you die and head back to nowhere, that your body begins to disintegrate? This thing turns into dust, and the instant that life leaves it, it starts to... So what is it that was holding it together and keeping it from doing that? There is something holding you together and keeping it from just turning into dust. And that thing that holds it together and allows you to be whole is this force that is invisible and in another dimension. And it's getting to know this force that is at the uppermost in my consciousness. And when you understand that when you come to trust in yourself, or trust in this inner divine part of yourself that is not physical, when you trust in the noticer rather than that which you notice, that you're really, when you come to trust in yourself, you're really trusting in the very wisdom that created you. You become one with the universal wisdom that is your creator, that brought you from the picnic to the room and leaving the room. See, what we have to learn to do is abandon the paradigm that other people or other things or other circumstances are responsible for our life, and instead know that we chose it. And we must learn to develop an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before us. And that inner candle flame tells us in our logical mind that if I have a problem inside, then the solution has to be where the problem is. So I will stop looking out here for the solutions to anything that's going on in my life that isn't working, and begin to ask myself, how am I processing my world? And some of the things that we've been handed are that other people are responsible for our lives, that your talent is handed to you and it's dispersed in certain amounts, and there's certain things that you can do and certain things that you cannot do. We've been taught that more is better and that we should chase after things while our higher self is always saying just be peaceful. We've been taught that the petty tyrants who show up in our lives are people that we should ignore and we should hate. I want to tell you something. The most influential person in my life was the most tyrannical. The man who abandoned me when I was just a few months old, who put my mother in a hospital on several occasions with his beatings, who spent 5 years in prison for stealing from the blind, selling their things and keeping the money, who walked away from a family of 3 boys during a depression, never paid a cent in child support and stole from everyone he came around, who required me to go into an orphanage for the first 10 years of my life and never showed up once to even say hello or I'm your father, who then visited that same abuse on 5 additional women and died in New Orleans in 1964 of cirrhosis of the liver as a pauper and had his body shipped to Biloxi, Mississippi, was my father. This petty tyrant who showed up in my life was someone that I had grown up and been taught to hate. But when I found myself at his grave in 1974, just a few months before I wrote Erroneous Zones, I had a transformational epiphany, a natohi, a great awakening, a great seeing, when I was able to forgive my father. And in the process of forgiving my father, I was introduced to enlightenment and was able to get my life on purpose once and for all. The end result was that my life absolutely turned around, and we are here tonight sharing in whatever I have to share with you because of that experience. And this petty tyrant, who so many of us think shouldn't have showed up in our life, the abuse that we had, the abandonment that we experienced, the relationships, the people who screwed us badly, the people who owe us money, who stole from us and all of that, we don't understand that it's all in order.